Hey, welcome back to another episode of Lightspeed Lawn Care Marketing. I am sitting down today with Brian Fullerton from the Fullerton Unfiltered podcast, and we are going to be talking about raising your prices. One of the most important things you can do to keep your lawn care and landscaping business healthy is to revisit your pricing strategy and make sure that it still makes sense for where you're at in business today. So, Brian, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely, Cody, man. Thanks for having me on, brother. Excited to share and see how we can help people grow.
Yeah. So let's just dive in. The first question we've got here is to just kind of think about why clients pay for services in the first place. Like, what are we actually selling them on?
Well, that's a good question, brother. I will tell you honestly, this is a tagline I think that we use, but I think we borrowed it from X Marcus too, is take back your weekends,
Mhm.
right? And so a lot of time, yeah, people are paying to have their grass cut, but if you really break things down, I think it's a little bit more than that. They want to spend time with their family, free time with, side hobbies that they want to pursue. At the end of the day, that's what you're really giving people back is the freedom to not have to really worry about their lawn, and they can spend that time invested into things that are more important to them. Number two, you're giving them a professional cut or service that they might not be able to do on their own. Of course, everybody's cut their own lawn in America, but at the same point, having somebody that's a professional take care of it is a little bit different. It's the good old analogy, like we've all cut our own hair before, but going to a barber, they just do a little bit better job.
Yeah, it's the important thing to remember here is that you're not just selling the work, right? You're selling the feeling of not having to do the work, of the time that they're reclaiming that they get to do something else. And so you want to make sure that you're leaning on that definitely in your marketing, but then consider, would people be fine paying more for the same service because of what you're giving them? Right. So if you're thinking about like just the cutting of the lawn and it's something you kind of enjoy, you're probably going to undervalue that a little bit. If you're the kind of guy who loves being outside, working with your hands, you're going to kind of undervalue it versus if I told you, something that you really cared about doing, you'd be able to do with that time instead. That is more valuable. And so positioning yourself in that way is going to get you out of the trap of like, well, we provide a quality service at a good price. You need to start thinking kind of next step.
That's solid information. I think a lot of people should really spend the next decade of their life mastering that conversation, because I don't think it's something that you automatically learn or pick up over, because there's 1,000 little nuances about how you can separate and differentiate yourself from your competition.
Mhm.
But I think what you said as a blanket statement is so true, because look, if you need to buy a hotel room, you can go to the Holiday Inn Express for $179 a night, or you can go to the Ritz-Carlton for $997 a night. So what's the difference? They're both giving you a bed, they're both giving you a room, they're both giving you access to a shower, but
Mhm.
the experience and the takeaway from going to a Ritz-Carlton, that's really what you're paying $800 more for per night. You're going there and enjoying that experience of people remembering your name throughout the whole hotel. The receptionist at the Holiday Inn doesn't care about your name. You have towels all over the place for a Ritz-Carlton, people waiting on you. You have the ability to tell your friends you stayed at a Ritz-Carlton, right? I mean, nobody bragged about the last trip that they stayed at a Holiday Inn Express, right? So that experience, I think, is something that we could all do a better job at with our business. And again, that relates to, you can design somebody an outdoor patio, or you can design them an outdoor living space where they can wine, dine, and entertain
Mhm.
and network with friends, family, relatives, and business associates, right? So sure, anybody can lay bricks in the ground, but to give somebody a world-class experience on their backyard patio for their, daughter's, wedding reception, that's a completely different conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to be positioning yourself as a premium provider. And that does mean that you have to provide like all of the examples you gave of what differentiates a Ritz-Carlton from La Quinta or whatever, is that service level is there. And so if you're trying to ask for a premium price and the service level doesn't match that, you're going to end up having problems. But if the service level matches the premiumness of the price, then you're going to be, doing just fine.
Well, I was just going to add really quick. I think the guy who started Louis Vuitton and, the whole holding company, the parent company, he said luxury profits are in luxury goods. And I always think about that with our lawn and landscaping business. Okay, we're not really in the luxury good business with mowing grass, but you can have a luxury experience. right? Which, not having the customer have to call you because you missed something, making the ability to pay their bill, or not even have to worry about paying their bill because you charge their card on file. Like, those are an experience that you can make your business and differentiate it that much better. And so, yeah, I absolutely love what you're saying, brother.
Yeah. Kind of the next thing here is just kind of quickly, how do you find the right price for your services?
Simply, you just have to understand your overhead costs. You have to understand the profit margin you're desiring. And then you have to look at what it's going to cost you to produce that service. And then that's where you're going to have your profit margin realized. Like, people way overcomplicate this. If it's $40 to mow and you have $18 in overhead and there's $22 left over, and then you have to get taxed on that and pay payroll and salaries and all that other mess, well, you're going to make, net $10 a lawn. Like, it's really that simple. If you buy a $30 Yeti mug, it costs $7 to make it. A bunch of people marked it up along the way. They sell it for $30 at Dick's Sporting Goods. Like, they want to make a 22% margin on that thing. Everybody knows their numbers about what their product or service costs. And so I think the whole knowing your numbers thing really just means, be intentional about your pricing. One thing that's alarming to me, short story long, is why is everybody at 40, 45, 50, 55, 60s and 80s for their lawn cuts? I've never bought a consumer good that's 40, 45, 50 or $55. Yeah. I bought a Yeti that was $31.97. I bought a t-shirt that was $25.82. Like, those are real numbers. Those are tangible prices because they understand the cost of their business, the cost of their goods, and the profit they want to make. So again, we all do it. I sit on this one too, but the just blanket statement, mow a lawn for $45. Why is it not $47.32?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think one other thing to look at here is to track your conversion rate from quote to close and see what that looks like. And if it is crazy high, if you're closing, like I see guys brag about numbers like, oh, I'm such a good salesman, I close 80% of the people that we talk to. And it's like, bro, your prices are too low. If 80% of people see you and decide that you're a mark and to take advantage of that deal,
I think you need to hit the revenue you need to make to have the profit that you want to have in your company. And whether you have maybe you have a hard sell, maybe you have a high ticket offer, maybe you're selling $50,000 landscape patios, maybe you're selling $500,000 landscape patios. If you have a 1% conversion or a 100% conversion, it's almost irrelevant. Like, because am I successful with a 1% conversion if I sell $1 million patio and I only sell 5 a year? Like, what quantifies somebody to be more or less successful with their conversion rate? Perhaps I'm only trying to close 1% of my clientele that we market to for $1 million patio, because for the love of God, who's in the market for a $1 million backyard patio? More people than you think. But if somebody said to me that their conversion rate's 30% on 30 grand patios, and somebody's got a conversion rate of 10% on $300,000 patios, like, I don't know. I just find that conversation to be so variable that it's almost irrelevant. I think what you really need to do is run a real business, know your numbers, and create the profit that you need to do, and backfill however that works. Is there better ways to get better conversion? Sure. There's 1,000 sales books on that and again, you can master that for the next decade too. But I think at the end of the day, you're trying to generate revenue. And so closing all of your sales, you're probably too low on pricing, blanket statement. Not closing any of your sales, you're probably too high on your pricing. There's a sweet spot that's going to come from trial and but you don't need to make a square peg fit into a round hole either.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think at the very least, it's a canary in the coal mine for either extreme, like you just said, where if it's 0% or 100%, there's a problem, but you don't necessarily need a pinned number as we're trying to hit 63%. That is definitely something that my marketing brain keys in on, because that is how corporate marketing always works, is oh, we're trying to hit this percentage of people hit this landing page, and then this percentage of people actually requests a quote. And so I'm kind of wired to look for, well, we've got to be tracking that at every layer of the funnel.
Yeah. I mean, when they stop printing money, you can stop raising your prices. I mean, the reality is business has a certain finite cost to it. So you have to raise rates accordingly, maybe not as aggressively sometimes, or maybe you offer incentives or discounts for sales. That's a typical part of your tool belt, depending on where the economy, broadly speaking, could be. But I've never seen anything become less expensive. right?
Yeah.
Like anything. The only thing that's actually like done pretty well over the last like 30 or 40 years is gas. And people are like, oh, gas is $4 a gallon or whatever. But like, if you actually look at like where it should be at like 8, 9, $12 a gallon, like all things considered, your gas is actually cheaper today than it was 25 years ago,
Mhm.
even though you're paying more per gallon. But if you look at the actual cost of it, but again, these are just things that people say that they haven't spent any time quantifying. But for me, I don't have any philosophy of not raising rates or not raising prices. Again, tell me anything that doesn't go up in price, you know?
This is kind of a thing that I have talked about for years now. I talked about this at my like last job. It's a thing I picked up from the Jonathan Potoshnik, the lawn care millionaire, on like when you're going to do like an across the board price raise. The sort of the testing strategy that he recommended was to kind of like single out your worst performing clients. Like this is also a thing for guys who have like maybe messed up their pricing and they realize they're losing money on jobs. You would never show up to somebody's house and pay them $5 to mow their lawn. But if you
Sure.
are losing money on the job, that is what you're doing. So I always tell people like test your price increase on those clients who are already unprofitable or like the biggest complainers, like the people who make the most work, and see how it goes
Yeah.
with them before you go to everyone.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great way to, I mean, if you don't need those clients, for example, anyway, then why not start with them?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. If they say yes, good. If they go away, you stop losing money. So either way, it's a win. Okay. This kind of gets into the we're kind of starting on emotion, coming back to emotion. How do you tell clients that you're raising prices without upsetting them?
Honesty is what I've always found to be the best policy with almost anything I do in business. I mean,
Mhm.
just to be honest. So, like, I don't think it's an inappropriate conversation to have when you say, "Hey, Tom, just looking to renew service. Excited about taking care of the lawn again for you this year. Last year the price was $38. We went up $2 to $40 this year just because of the cost of business and the cost of living increase. But nonetheless, we're super excited about taking you on as a client, and we hope we can provide service." And if he says, "Hey, I noticed the price went up $2. What's going on?" You say, "Well, of course we have to pay for salaries, the cost of equipment, fuel, insurance, a variety of other, expenses. But, it's just the cost of doing business. Things just go up in price and, apologies, but it's all we can do. And I'm glad it's only $2 instead of $4." And, I mean, I think where people struggle with this is realizing that it's okay to defend and stick up for yourself and run a real. I mean, I struggled with this for a long time, that I didn't feel worthy of charging, one, the appropriate price, but number two, raising rates. I was very afraid of people leaving me, canceling me, finding somebody else. What I've come to find is that, talk about that closing rate, I was the closing 100% of my sales guy. So the writing was already on the wall. It actually would have did me a better service not continuing to cut these people's lawns, because not only was I probably doing it for free, B, I was probably paying to do it. So I don't know if anybody can relate with that, but you shouldn't feel guilty about raising your prices, creating a strong profit margin. There's not a single thing, again, around us that hasn't went up in prices. It's shocking to me that we are either A, vilified, or B, apologetic about raising our rates 5-10% when the cost of lumber went up 350%.
Yeah.
I understand that people
Nobody at Home
vilify.
Depot apologized to me when I had to buy a
No,
$12 2x4.
no, dude. Yeah, $65 for OSB or whatever. Home Depot was like, "Hey, man, we're so sorry. We'll discount it, or we'll give you two free. Buy a piece of plywood. We'll give you two free pieces of a 2x4."
Mhm.
But and I get it. It's a challenge because the customers are used to our industry. By the way, happens in all service industries. So people are like, think that they're the victim in lawn care. It's all industry, but people are like, you're raising your bucks $2. Yes, you're gonna get chastised for it, but your core customers will get it. They'll understand it. They'll want to support you. In fact, the people that give you a hard time are probably a good indicator of people that you might need to evaluate if you want to continue service with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, especially if someone's calling to quibble with you over a $2 price increase on their weekly mow that's going to come out to like $8 a month. They're probably the kind of person who's out with a ruler checking the grass after it's cut to make sure it's the exact right height. Like,
Well, they're also the person that just bought the new 65-inch Samsung LED flat panel TV and spent $750 on that. Like, the reality is like, if somebody's complaining about the extra $2 per cost because it's going to ruin their budget, I would assure you it's not the extra, $55 a year, like you just said, Cody, to have their lawn maintained. It's probably a bunch of other bad lifestyle choices and financial choices that is causing them to no longer be able to afford you. And you're probably shining a light on like their irresponsibility or irresponsibleness of how they spend their money elsewhere on wants versus taking care of the needs, if that makes sense. So yeah, definitely. It's a head game. It's a head game. It can work on you, especially if you're a newer business owner, but don't be apologetic for anything you do, anything you charge ever.
Yeah. And then just kind of last question, do you evaluate your pricing every year?
100%. Yeah. Again, that kind of goes full circle to what we were talking about a minute ago, but you have to. I mean, you want to pay your guys more? I forget what it is, but it's like the wage, there's a technical term for it, but like wages have increased, but not at the same rate as the cost of inflation. So wage increase was like 5%, but inflation was, 8 or 12%. So even if they gave your people a 3% cost of living increase, they're going backwards at the tune of whatever, 5%, whatever it is. So it's not necessarily your responsibility to keep up with actual inflation as an employer. However, you don't want to see your guys become more poor, and you also want to make sure that they're able to keep up at least baseline with, the cost of living increase at a minimum.
You'd like them to continue living in the same place, not have to like retreat back.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So like, and I want to give my guys 10% raises year over year, or 15% year over year, right? It's just, you can't do that. And by the way, that has to be earned. It can't just be a frivolous, here's $2 extra. I mean, there's a cost of living increase, but that's not that's not the same thing as a raise, for taking on more responsibility, for more production, for more whatever, right? So those prices have to go up to be able to sustain the machine. I mean, my insurance went up a couple $100 on one of my policies out of nowhere. I said, what changed? And she goes, oh, it's just a price adjustment. It's a price change. It is what it is. We had no claims. We weren't bad people. We weren't evil people. We're just regular rank and file peasantry over here. And I was like, well, why is that? Why do I not have to pay like $200 or $300 more per year for my insurance? Like, by the way, as a business owner, you don't pay for your costs like that. Your customers pay for that cost. I'm not making less margin because my insurance went up. I have to pass that cost along to my customer.
Yeah.
Right. So it sucks because now everybody has to get their price raised by $1, but it's just it's a wage inflation spiral or whatever they call it. And so between the overhead costs going up and the labor rates going up and wanting to bless your guys more, costs naturally have to go up. And by the way, half of that conversation, a whole nother conversation for a whole nother time, half of it isn't anything you're doing. It's what your government's doing to devalue the currency. So, I'm not charging more. What we're making is making me less because they're devaluing the currency by printing the printing machine forever. So if you don't raise your rates 5, 8, 10, 12% per year, you're literally by defaultly going to be more poor. Just flat out. A great analogy, really quick analogy, really helped me out. If somebody said this once, was if you're like in an airplane, and I don't know like ground speed, airspeed, right? But if your plane's going 125 miles an hour forward, but the airspeed is knocking you back 135 miles an hour backwards, like you're drifting backwards, even though your engines are blaring, like you're going crazy with the engines, but you're actually going backwards. And so you have to charge not only the appropriate price, but a profitable price to be able to make headway.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Brian, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. So excited that you're here. If people want to find you online, I think probably most of our listeners know who you are, but if they want to find you online, where can they find you?
Yeah, really simply, Brian's Law Maintenance on YouTube, the Fullerton Unfiltered podcast, and then we have a training website called Entrepreneur Academy. But if you guys ever have any questions, comments, want to shoot me a DM on Instagram or an email, say hey anytime. We're here for you guys. We spent 11 years messing this thing up in the last 4 or 5 years, kind of righting the ship. We don't have it all figured out by any stretch of the imagination. We figured out how to make it work for us, though. And I think we can help you guys with growing a more successful lawn and landscaping business. So, Cody, absolutely appreciate the time, man. Hopefully this was helpful for a couple of people out there.
Yeah, I think so. All right, man. We'll see you next week, guys.